Hello and welcome back. In this video we will be looking at how to create a home screen. Specifically it will be a tab screen, so it will feature 3 different tabs, and the initial one will be presenting a overview of the items which will then be selectable, but that will be in the next video. So in this video we just make the tabs, the icon on the tab, and we make the transition between the splash screen and the home screen. So let's get to it. Alright, so we start off by having our changes from the last video on the master branch after being merged. So we will start by pushing that, and afterwards we don't need the feature branch anymore, so we can safely delete that, and even on the remote. And now we will create our feature branch, which will be the home screen, since we'll be working on that. And now we can go to our Xcode and start working on it. As you can see, this is where we left off the last time. We have our home folder, which contains a template view controller, and we will be needing a separate storyboard for our home screen. So we will start off by adding that, and afterwards we will add the appropriate view controllers that we need in the folder as well. We will be adding a tab bar controller. This will be the main sort of a container that is responsible for managing the tabs. Each of the tabs will be an individual view controller that we will be adding later on, but just for the time being we add a tab bar controller. And let's just reposition this so it's a little bit more manageable. So let's put this here and have these two right here. And we're actually not going to be needing we'll actually just need one of these, so one of these can actually be deleted, so let's do that. Okay, so now we have our tab bar controller and the view controller that is linked to the tab that we have at the moment. So we just have one tab and the corresponding view controller. In the storyboard we still need the actual class file that will be related to the UI, so let's add that, and we're gonna name it home tab bar controller. So this will be the class that relates to the tab bar controller, and let's just do this. It'll be a subclass of the UI tab bar controller. And let's just go back to the storyboard and assign it to the corresponding view, or should I say UI component. And now we can go back to our splash screen, and when the animation finishes we want to present our tab bar controller. So we will need to initialize it first, and in order to do that, instantiate it via the storyboard. We need to tell the storyboard which view controller we want to instantiate. So there may be many, and in order to differentiate between them we have to provide a identifier. Now this will be a string, so ideally we want to keep it in a place that relates to the view controller. What better place to put it than to have it as a static property on our view controller class, so that's perfect. And now we have our identifier available in the class, but we still need to actually give it to the UI component. So we go to our storyboard, we open the inspector, and under identify we have the storyboard ID, where we paste the identifier, which needs to match the name of the class, so be careful of that. And then we go to our identifier right here, and we use the property we just created. And now this will create a view controller. We need a specific view controller, so we are going to cast it to the appropriate type, in our case the home tab controller. And what we want to do, when we have the view controller, we are going to use a navigation controller that will be the underlying controller, and we are going to push this view controller onto it, or should I say onto its stack. It won't be animated because we want to have a basically in place transition. Well, it won't even be a transition, it'll just be replaced, so we want that. And what we need to do now is, since we're doing the casting, we need to tell the compiler that we actually want to unwrap this. So the reason being is that the storyboard instantiation returns a view controller, and since we are doing a casting to get a specific type, that casting may fail because we are passing in a string as an identifier, and we get a parent class type, and we want a specific type, but we don't know what that type is. So since we're doing the casting, it's optional, and we need to unwrap it in order to push it to the stack, because the parameter is non-optional. So we do that, and we no longer need the identifier, so we remove it. And that's it. We can build and see what happens. Okay, so we get a warning, which is Xcode telling us we should update build settings. We'll say yes. Let's do that. Just to have our project clean without any warnings or errors. Now let's go back to our home tab controller, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna need the view.load, just so we have a breakpoint to see that when the app runs, we actually get the instantiation for the controller that we want. So let's do that and run it. Okay, the app runs. Let's just set the breakpoint when our animation finishes, so we know we get that. Okay, so we get the trigger, and bam, we get an error, an exception. Specifically, it is telling us that the storyboard doesn't contain the given view controller, or should I say identifier, that we passed. So what happened? Well, we obviously created the identifier, which was copy-pasted from the class name. So there's nothing that could have gone wrong there, but if we go back to our code, the actual storyboard instantiation, we can see that we haven't specified which storyboard do we actually mean. So we do that, we use the auto completion, and we can see we get the name and the bundle parameters. So let's put the name as home, where we actually have the view controller with the identifier that we passed. So We do that, and great, the app doesn't crash. But what happened? Remember, we have a breakpoint at our home tab controller and it didn't get called, so obviously it didn't get presented. So let's check this out. So what happened is that we are pushing a view controller onto a navigation controller. But the navigation controller is optional and for a very good reason. In this specific case, it doesn't exist because we didn't add it. We just have the view controller that gets presented after the navigation, and that's it. So there is no navigation controller that could perform any pushing of additional controllers onto its stack. And in order to fix that, we go to our main storyboard and we select our view controller, which is the splash view controller, and we go to the editor and we click embed in, and we will embed it into a navigation controller. So now this view controller is the first in the stack of the view controller, of the navigation controller. And since this will be basically a splash screen, we don't need the navigation bar, so we can uncheck that. And now if we go back and run it, we can see the breakpoint gets triggered and we get our home tab presented. Okay, so now we can do a little bit of organizational stuff. So we go to our project hierarchy and we will be adding a folder, which will be a tabs folder. And we put our view controller in it, which will actually be a list view controller, so the first one. And just move the other two to the top level. Now if we go back to our home storyboard, we can assign the view controller to the first tab. So we do that. And if we're going to have many view controllers, in our case we're only to have 3, but you could have more than 3. Not too many, because you run out of space and it sort of beats the purpose of having tabs that should be easily accessible and not cluttered. So what we're going to do is, in order to prevent any cluttering inside the interface builder, we are going to add a storyboard reference. And this will basically serve as a link to another storyboard where our view controller will actually be created. So we have that, and now we need to link it to our tab controller. So we go to the outlets and we will link the view controller's outlet to our storyboard reference. And the reference will be to the list view controller, which we just named. And now we go back to our main storyboard. Actually, now let's just add another group. It'll be a list screen. So we put our list view controller there. Actually, let's name it, this will be the overview screen. And we'll add a storyboard, which will be the overview storyboard. Alright, so now we add our view controller, which will be the list view controller. So we add its identifier and its class. And let's just put its background view to a green color so we are sure that we are getting it presented. And if we go back to our home storyboard, we can update the storyboard reference and link it to the storyboard we just created that contains our view controller. So let's try this out. Okay, we get the breakpoint for the home tab and we get our green screen. So it worked. We have our view controller presented, our tab controller and the first tab. So that's great. And we are going to need a tab icon. So for that, we are going to need an image for it. And we go to our assets catalog and this should be familiar. So we add an image set and let's just create a group for our tab icons and add those in. We don't need that one. And we're gonna name this our home, which will be the first tab. And just drag the appropriate icons in it. Beware, when creating a tab bar icon, it needs to be of 75 times 75 dimension and a transparent and black. So okay, and now we go back to our home storyboard. We select the tab bar and actually what we need to do is select our view controller and set its bar item to our image. So this one. And we don't need a title. And that's it. Let's just run it and see what happens. Okay, so nothing happened. Our icon is not there. Now this is interesting because this should be working, and let's just see what happens if we replace our storyboard reference with an actual view controller right then and there. So let's do that. I'm going to replace this. And connect it. And let's give it the tab icon image. And now we can see when the app runs, our icon is presented. So obviously the problem is not where we are setting it, but in the fact that we're using a reference, maybe a Xcode beta issue. So how do we work around this? Well, we can always set things in code, which is what I prefer to do because it is the most sure way that what you intend to happen actually happens. So I encourage you to do as much as you can in code because it will give you more control. And we can undo this, so we will keep our reference. And now if we go back to our list view controller, we can set its tab icon to the one we have and the selected state to nil. Alright, so we go back to our storyboard. We're going to clear this image that we had set previously. And now if we look at what happens, we can see that our app runs and the tab icon is there. That's awesome. It's exactly what we want. So that's it in terms of the feature, and we can go back to our Git client. And we can unstage what we have. And let's just start off by adding the images that we added. And now we will add the changes that came from performing the changes suggested by Xcode when we removed the warning. Afterwards, we added our tab bar controller in our main storyboard. Well, actually, that isn't true. So what do you do if you have a commit message that is wrong? Well, you can go back and see what actually happened. So what we committed was a navigation controller, not our tab bar controller. And what we can do is we go back and we mark the commit options and check the amend commit, and we replace our commit message. And we can check our history and see that now it is correct. After that, so actually it is the home storyboard that contains our tab bar controller and our list view controller, both of which are visible in the XML right here. So we add that. And we also added the overview screen storyboard, which relates to this, so we add that. Okay, so we added the view controllers and the storyboards, but since they were new files, we forgot to add the changes that occurred in the project file. So just like we amended the last commit, we will amend this one and add any missing files to it. So that can be done as well. And afterwards we were going to add a list view controller. So we renamed the default view controller to the list view controller. So we add that. And now we're going to add the home tab controller. So make sure to not forget the project file changes. So we add them. And now we have our list view controller along with its project changes. And at the end, our splash screen view controller with the logic to present everything that we created, so we add that. And that's it. Now we push our branch. We go to our master branch and we don't have a develop branch, so let's just add it for the sake of Git flow. And we merge our feature branch into it. And push the changes. And that's it for our video. So what we did, we created a home tab bar controller. We linked its first tab to a specific view controller that we will be working on in the next video. And we also presented the home tab bar controller with its first tab after the splash animation was done. And we also added an icon to our first tab by importing it and setting it in code. And we did a little bit of an optimization, or should I say a little bit of cleaning up, meaning we replaced the view controller in the storyboard with a storyboard reference in order to save some space. And after that, we took a look at committing the changes in Git. We also got to know the amend commit option, which allows us to change a message of a previous commit and even add files that we may have forgotten. Bit of a note here, so that only works when the last commit was not pushed, so be mindful of that. But that's it for our video. So make sure you click that like button if you found this video useful, and make sure you subscribe in order not to miss any videos in the upcoming future. So thank you for watching and have a great day.